Hello, fellow devs. Welcome back to uh, our series on building the payroll system. So last week we worked on a bunch of things. That is setting up our implementation on the role-based access. So today I'm going to be finalizing on a few things. So let's see what was left so that we can finish up so that we can proceed to the task part. So we needed a way to set up the roles and the user. So currently we don't have a way to do the program setup so that we can create a default user and send the roles. But for now, what we'll do is just finalize on the user checks so that we finalize on the API endpoint protection. Uh, what we'll do is to go to our pre-authorize clear, and whatever I'm showing is visible. Okay, it was login required. So we go to our decorator. So we had gotten the authority. So we'll add a new feature to the user. That is to make sure that we have someone who can do the setup of our application. We'll come to our database schema. Then I'll move to user table. Then I'll add a key here. It's admin. Default will be false so that not all users will be admin by default. So this is just to bypass for setup. So then we can just run our migrate new so that we get the latest updated version. Yes, so then from here can just add yarn migrate deploy. So this should sync up our database and make sure that the key is added. Now if we come back to our login required decorator, in the user here we'll need to include is admin be true so that whenever we'll be doing a check here, so we have the user. Next is to check is our JW. Some utility here. Get some so we'll come to our authority manager and just create an instance of it. So if we'll check if the user is admin, user dot admin, the user is admin, then we can just return original method dot apply the arguments, but we'll need to assign the user first. So then if the user is not an admin, then now we can now start doing our check. Const authority manager will be, we can use that. Yep. I didn't think of that. So we have our auth manager. So in the auth manager, what we'll do is to extract the permissions, because we had already set up a way to extract. So we just validate. Once we do the validation, it should be able to give us an array of the extracted authorities. So because the user exists, and so at this point, if permissions.length is less than 1, then we can just reapply the same, so that means you are authenticated, yet there's no permission being checked against. But if now the permissions are more than 1, then what we'll do is to get the user permissions. So in the permissions, we'll also need to add module with yeah. So the name, we really need the module, really? No, the name already contains module, so we don't need the module. Then we'll flatten user permissions. We'll do a flat map. So the role will give us role dot role. So that will give us role. Let me see the structure. We'll get role. Once we get the role permissions, let me see. So we'll extract role permissions. But just do action from here. User.userRoles.role. After getting the role, then now we can extract role permissions. So in the role permissions, here is where now we can get role permissions dot map. We'll get a single permission. We'll get a single permission that so in here we'll take in we'll have permission. So in the permission we'll have the name, then we'll just return name. So then out of this you can just log the user permissions. So then we can proceed to log in. In the auth here, we'll just log in. I don't think if we're running. Let's kill. Okay. So we've logged in. Let's try to get roles. So at the moment, we have no user has no assigned role. So in here, what we can do, we can just run yarn db view. So do we have that? Let's check in now. So if you want to check our DB view, then backend DB view. So this should give us local instance of our database. Takes quite some time to load. So you can see we have 3 modules. So we have 3 modules. Um, 11 auth permissions, Then we have two auth roles. Then we also have around 39 sessions. Then we have role permissions, which is just one. So then we also have tokens. We have user roles. We have users. So if we come to user roles, I can add a record here. That is which can have a user, but let's just discard that for now and add an endpoint for assign role. In here, I'll in the user side, we'll need to the schema. We'll export const add assign or remove role user. Remove user role request. This will take a user ID, which will be a number, and roles. Should be role IDs or roles ID. Role, which should be an array numbers. Okay. Out of this, we'll come to this service where we get all users, then duplicate, then assign user role dot service. Then we'll just name this assign. Assign user role. Assign user role service. This will take in API request. At below here, we'll just export a type, assign or remove. Then we can take this and put it in our transactional context, transaction context. So then we can pass our body type. Let's just fix this. Then we can remove that. Let's get the transaction context. So then here we'll get the data and the transaction itself. So in here we'll add a method known as assign role. Okay, assign roles. Assign roles. So our data will include we'll get all the existing roles, get the role and the role IDs. So we'll try and get existing user, just a single user. We'll destructure the array, which will be await transaction dot select. So I'll just select just the ID. Select ID will be user dot d dot from user, where the user matches the user ID provided. Shall we not have is okay? So we'll have a check here for equal. So if the user does not exist, we'll throw a new API error, user not found. Then we'll check for roles, existing roles. Will be await transaction dot select ID from auth role. From the auth role, this will be ID, and we make sure that this will be auth role dot ID to match the role ID provided. But this auth role, then these array in, there's something to do with array. Let me check on auth. Okay. In array. So this will pass this in here. Yeah. So we'll check here. If the length don't match, then we'll just get we'll get the missing roles. Then for the first one, we throw an error. We'll throw an error. Some selected roles do not exist. We won't join them there. so don't exist. Then we'll have where we pass our meta IDs. We'll pass that there. So after that, that means const, we can just create const say it so formatted, yeah. Formatted roles will be the role IDs provided, then we'll combine, then we'll insert into insert so insert into user roles, then we pass values, which is the formatted roles. See, pass our formatted roles, then we execute. Afterwards, we can just say here roles assigned successfully. Then the data, we won't have any data, yeah. So this is transactional, so that means whatever we'll be passing here should, something fails, we should get an our database should not have any issues. Consistency. What do we have as okay? Let me just format this. So once you have this assign, then for the assign part, it should behave in a way that it's assign or an assign. I think something to update user role. So this is something we can do. Update user role service, then update. So this should update. So we can check for pre-existing. So pre-existing user roles, they should be pointing to, we'll select from the, we'll just select where the role ID matches the user role dot role ID. Not really. This is for the select from user role, where we'll use an and here from drizzle. So it should match where the user role.user ID matches the user role, and on this end should be equal actually it should just be where the user ID matches the auth user role. So this means that for the pre-existing, we'll just get the user roles that matches the user ID. Then we'll now get const roles to remove. We'll filter out roles that so for the role IDs that are incoming, we'll filter out the pre-existing, the ones which are pre-existing in the database. Then I think we'll need to also user ID. Yeah. So we'll filter out existing user roles where the role IDs must match. If they are not in the incoming IDs, then we need to eliminate them. So we'll have also, so in here, get roles that need to be removed. Then next, get roles that need to be added. So these will just be roles that are incoming fresh. So that means the roles to be added will be the ones that now will be supplying here. Then we'll check if roles to remove dot length is greater than 0, then we'll need to delete these roles. So the condition must be the user role. You combine where the user ID matches the user ID which is incoming, and the role IDs are in the roles to remove array. So that's it. Roles updated. This should be updated successfully. User roles updated successfully. So once we have these updates, then now we can create our controller. And the controllers will run. When the create user, we'll just take this name. Then this should be our controller. So then afterwards, this should be base post request, posting this data. Then just take whatever we have here, then inject it here so that the body matches what you are having. Then this will need at login required. So for now, we'll just have login required. Then this will be update. We'll take the name of this service. Then reassign. We'll just have to reassign it here. So then we can rename this to service. Make it simpler. This dot service dot update. We'll pass in the body. So our data will be body. So that we get from the feedback, get the status code, then we run the body. Then now in here, we can just extract this and make it a controller. Roll. Then we can assign our index here. They should say assign update role. So we'll just pass this in here and should be able to pick it up. Then come to our users. The users will duplicate the create, then get role. In here we'll add get role. It'll be a post request. Send. I think we have a wrong schema. What is this? We'll take this schema, pass it to our controller. Remove the unused one. So that we now come on this other side. Get user ID required body. Now we can inject. This should be all IDs. It should be an array numbers. let's say this is user 4. Then we have role IDs of 6. Send. Expired, refresh. Update. Send. When we come to our assign user, we'll wrap this method with @assign at transactional service, so that when we call this, it becomes transactional. Then now you'll see user not found. So then we can add some meta tags here. The user is not found, then add ID oh. So we so far have let's remove that when now we come here back, send. Some selected roles do not exist, then you'll see we have 56. So if I look for role number 2, send, you'll see we have successfully user roles updated successfully. And now if we go to our UI and refresh, you should see we have user ID with role 2. So if we check on the role, you'll see it's test role, and now we go to our Preauth. Where is it? Now we try to get users. For the currently logged in user, we should be able to get user roles, and because our login required, the user is not let's just make sure we get everything here on top. So if I log what we have here, we have permissions and user permissions. So user permissions represents the permissions that have been passed and you'll see so user has permission to create a role. Then the permissions that have been passed in the user, they get all users. So where we get all the users, you can see we have this meaning permissions, user permissions. If we go back to the login required decorator, what we have here whatever has been passed on the other side. So if I assign more roles on this end, so let's say get users, then whatever has been passed is users list. Then user permission is just to get a role. So at this point, the user does not, the permissions do not match. So we can check. You can check if the user so we've seen we can get the user permissions. Let me just visualize this again. Oh, okay. So if we send this request, you'll see what we have is role create. So the permission which has been, the role which has been assigned is strategically meant for role creation. So we need to check if this is one of the permissions has been passed. Yeah. So you can see this permission. How do we do that? So if length is less than 1, that means you are created. Then we'll just check here const pass access will be every permission should be included in the user permissions. So if has no access, we'll just throw an authorized. Yeah. Say you are not authorized. See source. You are not authorized to see this resource. Then we pass status code of forbidden. So if now I try and send this request, then you'll see I get a 403. Yeah, as it should be. So up to there, we have, let me just get the user type. Let me try and narrow what we get. So in the role column, this will be name. Then we can get the ID also. And in the permission, we'll get this only. Then from here we in the column section, what we'll get, we need to get role ID, permission ID, and maybe only those. So if we check on the user role still has so many attributes, columns, filter this out. Okay, so we have the user, the role permission, how do we extract the, let's see, let's add a function here, get user, get session user, so what do we need for the user? Find first where, we only need the user ID. Should be a number. So what we'll do is to extract this, from and plug it here. It will be asynchronous. This session user, then we return so we can check this and plug it in here. This should be a number. So from this, we can take this here, move file. Let's move this. So it is get session user ts. We'll take this and plug it here. Import this import the missing details, user v format. Then we can export this. So then we can also export type session user, which will be return type of get session user. Then now we can extract this, move to our move here, get unused. Then this should remain lightweight a bit. We'll import this, and those errors should be gone. So this should only be taking the responsibility to make sure that we have the correct data, the user. Now come back to assign in the controller. Then now in our request context, we can assign this. So that if at all we'll be making adjustments, it should be able to propagate across the application. That means if now I go to a controller, try to the structure user, so let's get here. We need some surfaces. So can get a helper here. Export type promise so will be promise type So we can have this helpers here. So promise all. You pass your promise type, then it should be able to infer. So we'll take one. So we'll get promised here in our get session user. Then now if we pass this promised, we should be able to get our session user. So afterwards, come back here. The user should be, we can access the user directly here with the user dot. Now you can see all the properties are available for you. That's a string dot user roles dot map. So you can see we have all these properties here. Yes, I'm using Express for this, but I've built a lot of things around it to make sure that we get good developer experience with decorators and dependency injection. So in the description, there's a link to the repo if you wish to look into it. I have this kind of commit history. You'll see we have like day 1, a day 10 with those commit names. So check, we have around 57 commits, and you'll see day 1, day 11, day 9, day 8, 7. Then we started off from day 6 for naming this. You can follow through. It's also a monorepo, so working with Express, and in the localhost here, see we have the backend running, but also we have the front end running. This we are still building on the APIs so that we can I know React use state, use effect, and use call, but I don't know much about hooks. There are so many concepts that I don't like. Webhooks, sockets. I'm currently doing next. Okay, so webhooks is kind of a way that let me get a razor. So in my next part, I'll be doing the sockets. Personally, I haven't done sockets so much, but I'll be working with sockets. So if you're working with webhooks, we'll have this as a third party. We can have a third party API. So this is our API. Let's just name it local API. Then you can have your client. So for instance, I can say if I need to make a payment through this third party, so step one, I need to initiate an API request. Initiate payment. So for initiation of payment, that means this is done from client. So that is for step one. Then for step two, we call our backend. Then our backend calls the third party API. So once our third party calls our backend calls the third party API, it means that for these two services to communicate, it will require that the third party knows a way by which it can post data into our system. So that's now the concept of webhooks. So it will have a hook and an endpoint. So in this, when our backend calls the third party, we provide what we call callback. Okay, so this is callback endpoint. So the callback endpoint, the necessity is to make sure that once the payment goes through, we are posted on the status of our application. That is, did it fail or did it go through? So when you call our backend might save transaction details. So this is step one, then step two, then this is step three. But in all this, so this will have a hook to call our local API through the endpoint, the callback endpoint that will provide for this third party to know where to post the data once it has processed our data. So let's see webhook design. So let's see an example of webhook. It's just a communication between two services. So these concepts are not that hard. Let's say, for instance, what are webhooks and what is an example? So you have a team member, webhook origin from Jira, then you have a webhook URL, then a webhook recipient. So the recipient is now where the data is going to be posted. And what happens is the Jira service will post data to this third-party URL, and the recipient, which is like our local, is now where the data is going to be posted. So if you've looked on something like GitHub Actions, you'll see that whenever you post data and you have those GitHub Actions, they watch for did you do a merge commit? Did you do something like a pull request? Then it should be able to call a hook on the side to maybe deploy your application. So that's how simple I think I can explain webhooks. But the more you interact with this, the more you'll get the concepts. So on React hooks, that is use state, effect, and use callback. So I think I have some videos on use reducer, but these hooks you only learn whenever you need to use them. So personally, I use state, use effect, use reducer sometimes if I have a simple application, but for very complex, I'll use some third-party libraries like we have React Redux, but majorly we use, so for if you have functions that you need to memorize, that is to cache, you'll wrap your function with see, you have something. I don't think if I've done so much content, but let's say I needed to call my like I run my, you see, we usually have use effect to run at any point that your page is loaded. Then you'll see that you'll have your function in here. Then you do a functional call. If you have something like promised x, which should be async, you know that you can't call x in here, x. Then we can just pass this. So you can't await in here. I don't know whether I disable something. For major cases, you'll have issues. Yeah. So you can see await expression only allowed within async functions and at top level modules. You'll see you can't add async here. In that case, what you can do is to just wrap this with I use callback to make sure that if in case you have any dependencies, you'll have it, but x will now be a promise wrapper for your function. Then now you can just call x without any issues. So then it should solve in the correct order, even if it's synchronous or asynchronous. So this is for memoizing functions, and use memo is for memoizing, or we can say if you need to do some computation or a computed property, you can use the use memo. But personally, I don't think you need to understand everything to use them. It's just best to apply only whenever you need to use something. If you try to learn everything in one go, you'll find yourself not even learning anything. So for the part of sockets, Also, I can say it's just for sending, because it's that bidirectional, it's just for sending um, signals, kind of signals. Uh, so you can await maybe a promise letter, but you send the data instantly to make sure that the real-time communication is persisted, but you use the callback data in a later instance. I'll be using sockets in this application implementation for things to do with the tasks and task statuses and for the notification. So if you'll be here, you'll be able to learn a thing or two. So Redux, I think the boilerplate for Redux is one of the things that makes it really hard to work with. But for state management, personally, I like Jotai. Jotai is I don't know, I just find it simpler. I moved from Redux to Jotai because you don't need to wrap the whole application in a bigger context. You can just uh, you can have like derived states from your global state, and what it has is set a state and get a state. So it's kind of quite easy to play around with, and this is how easy it is to be used. You don't need to have a context wrapper for doing wrapping the whole of your application to make sure that your state is available globally. So you can you can try and look into TIE if you find I don't know where use recoil comes from, but there are so many state managers for React that I can't throw away. But whatever is easy for you, just work with that. So also you can't know everything. Some people also prefer Zustand, I don't know. Yep. These also require. Yeah, I have a friend who uses this. Yeah, so as I was saying, just whatever works for you. Something can be simple for me and it becomes hard for you. I usually say that what makes you uh, like develop faster, just go with that. So if you're going to take 30 days learning a state manager, use something which you can learn in 2 days. You can go far within very few days as you learn other things. Nice to know. I'll try it out. So for now, let's complete. What did we have? We'll just discard those so that we finish up on the backend in our table. Add this migration. Today's day 13. So day 13. I'll surely take a look into recoil. So hash implement role-based access. So add this admin flag users. Then this other one we can make this day 13 hash 1, then say add user lookup for roles when authority is passed, login required. So just sync this, and I think our RBAC should be done by now. So let's organize our tasks. We'll just let's go to branches. Go to branches. So how to rename remote. Delete the old branch. Name your local branch. Check out to branch you want to rename. Okay. Let's name develop. Name is a dev. Then we can just delete this other one. Git pull. So you can switch to dev. Should have the latest changes. If merge this, you can now create a post. Compare and create pull requests. So both authentication, auth setup. and authorization. So this closes one, closes hash. This should go to tables announcement, projects, payroll, status, progress, milestone, basic auth, then we'll just this is done now. We come to our project. We have two now done. So role-based access done, login done. We'll create another issue, another item, which will be what's it? Create a setup script for initializing the system when still fresh for admins only. So we'll convert this to an issue. We need automatically our first user who is the system in manage other users application setup. So this should set up the following. That is number one, users, initial user, setup roles, setup modules and permissions. So after setting up the user, we set up the role, then we set up the modules, and that should just do it. Update. So I'll choose priority. This is high priority. Small. Estimate just 2. Duration current. Start date today. End date tomorrow. Okay. If it takes longer, I can just I'll convert this to an issue. Our payroll system. This will be issue number 5. Then assign to myself. Then I'll just drag this. So that is the next thing. Let's work on close others. We have our users here. We have our auth. We have a setup service. Then in our transactional context, we have a PG transaction. So we'll have some scripts here to just do a setup. So this one is for permission setup. So I will have utilities for running our setup. So module ts. So we'll export class for module permission setup. This should be injectable and should mark it as dependency for us to be able to resolve it. Then we can just say see in our command we have helpers. Then we can have one for DB here. So export type PG transaction, transaction, which will be a PG transaction from rem PG. Then we'll just say here we can have a type T, but we initialize to any. Then we can pass that here. So let's see what we add. Service PG. We can go with the extends record so tquery results extends let's just have it as any. Then now we can have this fully available. So that let me see if you have any errors. So next is to in the setup here you'll need to export sync setup. This will need just DB transaction, which will just, this shouldn't be undefined. So now we can set up here. Then we can select authority manager. I'll install a plugin here for plus organizer. Nice TypeScript plus organize. So then I right click, organize current file. So this should give some spacing. So in the setup, we'll take is in here. Then bring it. What equal result. So we import inject. So auth manager. So that should do it. We have this module permission setup. So then we can here and private module permission setup. Then now we can just wait. So this will make this kind of modular. Then we make sure it's not undefined. Then we can go ahead, add a user, user auth setup .ts. Can extract the because they are kind of related. Auth setup. Then do we need authority manager? No. But we'll need password processor. That is for generating passwords. Then we'll need to get our the schema the env schema. We'll add here default user password, default user email, then also default. So then those will be very essential when we'll be doing the user setup. Then come here, we'll need a service config. We'll get the config service, config. So we'll get cost equals to dot. Then we'll get user email, user password, username, then user password. Then here we'll create a new user, const user, new user will be, where do we set up create user first? So we'll assign get schema validator, get schema validator, so this should validate, this should validate what we have. Then where do we get get user request? What we validate here should be checking type T, which will be pointing to any if provided. Then we'll have our T here. So then what we'll pass here is create user body. Then we'll pass create user schema. We'll pass in this schema. So in the email, we'll pass in the default email, first name, gender. We'll have it as just other, so that the user will set up once they update their profile. So for the new user, if all is well, const existing user. So we'll check transaction select from, so we'll select from our user where or from drizzle. So equal We'll check whether the email matches or the username matches, or we check if there's an admin already. User.isAdmin, then we'll pass here true. So this means if in case we have an existing user, this usually returns an array, so we'll just destructure the first item, whether the email matches, username matches, but we don't need the last name. Those can hide. So we use transaction to make sure that nothing works if we don't. If anything fails, then the whole process should fail. So if we don't have an existing user, then we just await transaction dot insert into user, then we pass in the new user. We say is active is true. We mark is admin. We'll mark a few things here. Is email verified true. Then our password processor will password be await password processor. Fix the problems. What do we have? This should return a string. Then just move use imports, then extract user auth setup, bring it to our Payroll setup, plug it here, say inject our user auth setup, then they should point to this. Then we just await. All of them should have a setup function. So we'll narrow it down to that. So reason why we are not throwing any error here, the user setup. So if only the user does not exist, should we create the user? Otherwise, it should be assumed that the user already exists, and we proceed on. Then for the module also, there's no error being thrown here, so it's just syncing everything into DB, making sure that our app is well set up without any issues. But in case an error is thrown, it should be able to explain. So how do we make sure that everything is in sync? Check what I've done in the env, then update my env example to have them. Default user password, then default user email, then so we'll extract this, add it in our, I think it should be having issues already. You'll see we already have issues missing environment variables. This is because Zod tries to validate our env, an application load up. So I'll update the env here. So default password, let's just say admin. Now user email admin@gmail.com. Then username will be admin also. Admin hash at hash 1, 2, 3. That is not hard. So then currently if we check our database, the Drizzle Studio, you'll see we have two users, that is Mike Juma. The only difference is the username and the email. So let's try and run our setup because it's already here. So we'll need to, I don't know how long, try to refresh our token. Need to log in, send our login, set up the application. And you can see setup ran successful. Let's check our database. If I refresh, you can see we have an admin, then the email and the gender is other. Let's check on added isadmin. Now the isadmin flag is marked as true, so that means our application can now run without any issues. When we initialize, then now these are the credentials we'll be using. Then now the user can automatically change to whichever credentials they want. So that is for the setup. So I'll just have very simple day, today's day 13. Closing hash. It's issue number 4. So now we can say setup initial proceeding user and module, modules and permissions. Add, then come to fresh. We should have a new tab. Let's create a pull request. Development. create a pull request. Dev main. Oh, sync. So we'll take this. So just idea process. Payroll will stop. Then they should merge. Have issue to we only have one issue left, that is now moving to task creation and task management. So far what we've done is add a setup script for initializing our admin user, also finalize on the pre-authorize and check for the permissions if they are matching whatever is as passed in the login required. Then we've also updated the user to have the isadmin flag. Next to it, also set up. So next thing what is left is to move now to the part for creating the tasks and the tasks management. So we'll have users currently, and I won't have multiple users, so I'll just have users. Those users having given permissions access the system. Then now we can continue to have things like staff, other things related to it, but for now we'll just keep it at. Then we'll be assigning tasks to users. We'll design it, see how it will create. So for the task for today, next, now we shift task creation and management. This is quite broad. The way to link issues. Okay. So see what you have in the Mhm. Now login page. This should name to or username. Should work. Let's try admin at this will be a variable. So you can see we are able to log in, but we haven't really set up state management for this application. So let's set up state management. Okay. So we'll need to add come to the front end. I think I'll open this. So we can work on this in isolation. Best state manager practice. Recall. The primary advantages of simplified based approach present 100% states. It means you can easily manage your entire state within function component using led by recoil library as opposed to this dot state, this dot set state. Okay, used in traditional statement flexibility and easily adapt to various statement needs, management needs, and complexities in your project. Of this is seen in component isolation, which allows you to isolate state management in specific components or share states across as needed. This feature makes it suitable for both small and large scale fast debugging. Seamless compatibility with existing projects. That well. Hmm. Make a angle and wish to do. I think next we'll stand and build the dashboard front end next chapter, so that I think we can hold it off at there the moment. So thank you all for those who tuned in. Let's meet in the